Hello and welcome to Cross's Corner, and I'm Martin Cross. It's nearly Christmas time. We're doing this, and in the corner today, the one and only Tom Digby, not just an Olympic gold medalist in the British men's eight, but the six man, what some might say the preeminent seat in the eight. Hi, Tom.
Hello, how you doing, man? Good to be
Yeah,
here.
well,
Thanks for having me
I,
on.
I'm really pleased to be here and talking to you. So, how is your day been today?
Better than today, really. I've been running around doing a bunch of different things lately, but on holiday now with my family. So a bit of training this morning, a bit of skiing, nice lunch, and then
Ah,
an hour of reading and work this afternoon. So it's been good.
what is your ski? What are your skiing credentials then? I mean, in terms
There
of
hasn't been a
like,
there hasn't been a lot in the last few years for obvious reasons.
yeah.
The risk got a bit higher as we got closer and closer to the game. So it's been on the cards for a while. So excited
So,
to be back out here and
are you mainly like a blue run skier, or do you venture onto reds, or what
I
like?
venture onto reds. I don't tend to venture like in between the trees and on the jumps and the bumps. That's where I'm most alive. I kind of like I grew up doing mountain biking, so it feels the same when you got like the rolls and the dodging trees and the snow is so deep out there that you can you barely feel like you can get because if you fall fall over, it's about a meter of powder. So.
Yeah, yeah. So, you've obviously had some interesting things since Paris, and I want to talk a lot about Paris and stuff before that.
Mhm.
But I know you guys went up to the Sports Personality of the Year do, and I was going to ask you what that was like for you.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, actually, it's the first time I've seen a couple of the guys since Paris because Sholto went off for a long while, Indonesia somewhere, and we haven't actually had the nine of us together. That'll happen for the first time next week because it's Harry Brightmore's getting married.
Oh yeah,
Um, so that'll be an exciting day to get all of us together, which is obviously the biggest thing happening that day. um, but but yeah, that would be good fun. And so it's good to see everyone again, and then you get the red carpet out, and it's just good to chat with other people and sort of get a different perspective on
yeah. Who
sporting life, really.
who'd you talk to then?
Um, I chatted to Harry Akins Ariti of Fury. He does the Gladiator show. I think
Yeah,
it's Fury. Um, but so he's had a it's like he's just done MasterChef, done a lot of diverse stuff. So he's sort of kept his sporting life going and is heading towards being a presenter. So actually, myself and Dave Ambler ended up chatting to him for a little while, and he's a very interesting guy, very high energy, very funny, good laugh. And then honestly, I mean, you spend the first section of the evening catching up with everyone who you haven't seen from the rowing lot. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is also really nice to do because we're all scattered around now doing different things.
Um, so I tend not to watch Spotty because I'm always find myself frustrated at the little sort of coverage that rowing seems to get. Uh, is that something that you think or thought about this year's Spotty or not?
I mean, I think that in general, but I expected it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it was funny. I was almost planning on not going, and my dad was like, "Oh no, they'll get the Olympic champions at least. Like they'll do a little thing for all the 14 gold medalists." And I was like, "Dad, they won't. I know they
Yeah.
won't." And he was like, "Oh no, they will." And so lo and behold, it's exactly kind of what I expected. And it was an awesome event. I think that's to do with bigger things about the commercialization of our sport and
Yeah.
telling the stories and all of that. So it was great to be there.
So what's
Not
what's the
necessarily the fault of the BBC.
what's the best thing you've done since Paris then?
Oh, good question.
Thank you.
I'll go for the corner. Yeah, moving in with my partner, I guess, is the biggest thing.
Oh wow.
We've been together 8 years, and rowing has kept us from living together. She wanted her life in London rather than moving in towards Reading, Caversham, near the lakes. And obviously, we met while I was 17, so it's been a long while. So it's awesome to make that step, and she's been crucial in my journey and my life, and will be going forward as well. So that was awesome. That was a big step.
That's amazing. And I gather you live 2 roads down from Bobby Thatcher.
Do I? Oh,
You
so I haven't
do,
been told that yet.
because he, I think, was talking. It might have been to Dave Ambler or possibly Freddie. I can't remember. I had to ring him up because they used a St Paul's student as a sub in the Oxford Blue Trilates, and it was
Oh,
like
right.
I didn't really know that much about him, so I contacted Bobby and we had a chat, and he said, "Oh yeah," and I heard that Tom Digby's living a couple of roads away from me.
Oh, right. Well, I'll have to hit him up. I'm
Yeah,
trying to get good at ski erg because I'm doing a bit of high rock. So, and he knows the ski erg lately as well, I've seen. So
he's
maybe I
done a
can.
few records on the ski. Now I know you have broken records on the erg. Maybe in your young days. I don't know about recently.
It was in my young days.
Do you still hold any records?
I haven't checked. I know a couple got broken. I think that by the Gennaro,
Oh, Gennaro
the
Di
massive
Maro.
cow guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he got a couple. Last I checked, there was one or two because I had a week where I broke five, six, because it was a training camp that Sholto, Charlie, Rob Hearn, Wingo, when they were all at Yale, got invited on, and I didn't get invited, so the kind of changed a little bit, and we had a bit more freedom. And I was what 18 at the time, I guess. It might have been because it was the junior records, so the freshman year, and enjoyed proving a point, uh, as you do when you're young, trying to say, look at me. But also, I knew it was going to be my last chance because in these programs you don't have necessarily the time to go and smash all these erg tests. So we had 10 days where without like the same training as normal, things were moved around a bit. So I was just in a 10-day period that all happened, and then I got really ill, surprisingly enough.
Oh, oh. Do you remember? I mean, just shoot out a couple of the records that you got during that ridiculously short period.
6K half hour, 10K hour half marathon. I think
You are crazy, man.
it was crazy, but it fueled itself. When one went down, I was like, I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Um,
It was
s-
fun.
so it's interesting, I guess. I mean, you're probably not far off various records, but it's interesting that in your senior years, I guess so far, that you haven't been noted as a record breaker in the same sort of way.
No, and I've asked myself those questions as well because I guess when you break those records when you're younger, you sort of set your sights and you keep setting your sights higher and higher. And if I didn't feel the program worked for me. I didn't get PB outside of December 2021. So my year of lockdown and training, I PB across the board. Yeah, across the board. So straight out of uni, I got second on the 2K, a couple of seconds on half hour and stuff like that. And then I went into Caversham, and it sort of never seemed to really. I kind of just would scrape to just within reach of my best, but never really felt like I was stronger than it. And then there could be a number of things, and I do attribute it to multiple things. But
So
the program itself definitely being a part of that.
yeah, I was going to say about the program because it's quite interesting in terms of if you are fatigued and you're doing an ergo test, a 2K, then you're not going to do your best score.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't even put it down to the fatigue within the program. I didn't. I didn't think the program was enough in terms of the volume. If I'm being completely honest,
Yeah,
for my personal liking.
yeah,
Um, so there are individual nuances, and the program isn't made to nuance to every individual. The Dutch program, for example, does that, and they got some
yeah.
good results out of that. So I don't know if the leadership at British Rowing are looking to that, but at the same time, we had a great regatta. So I feel like there's also the "don't fix what ain't broke" approach. So it's not
Yeah,
about me getting PBs on the ergo; it's about how well the boat goes as a whole, and that's kind of how I had to internalize it because it's kind of strange going into the Olympics, supposedly the biggest the
Well,
biggest, what is the biggest race of your life, and then not feeling like you're at your best physically, which is strange. But
okay. So
I think
before we leave ergos, how close to 540 on the 2K are you?
I only got to 44.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Which is awesome.
but
I
yeah,
have to
no.
say, if anyone's listening, like 544 is phenomenal.
If
Um,
if this is the space for bragging rights, I guess the big number one is my half hour rate 20 PB is probably the most
yeah.
impressive of the lot,
What's
which is
that then?
135.
Oh, a half hour at rate 20 at 135. That's crazy.
Yeah, that was 2021 in lockdown with in training with Dave Ambler, Dave Copley, and Freddie Davidson when the squad was very locked down, and the only thing we could do was sort of pull ergs to kind of get, it was Jurgen at that time early on, and then Steve Trapmore
Yeah,
that to look at us, and that's why I was like, well, that was my one of my look at me scores, and but anyway, so that was the motivation fueling that kind of performance.
yeah, yeah. So you were in this amazing four, I think in 2019 with those guys. Was it with Dave and
Mhm.
Freddie and Charlie Elwes?
Yes, it was. Yeah, yeah, that was a good year.
I mean, that's that four. The names in that four are ridiculous. There's like so many world championship gold medals. Obviously, you and Charlie Olympic champions as well. What was that like to
Mhm.
row in?
It was great fun. Me and Freddie were, I mean, sat directly behind him in the bucket at that point. It's at Bowery, Charlie stroking, which sometimes he forgets he even did because he laughs about how that went well. He's obviously phenomenally talented, but he's a goofy guy sometimes as well. So it was. I mean, it was a really fun experience as well. We just made a laugh out of it. Didn't take it too seriously. Obviously, that was the goal. By that point, Charlie and I had four silver medals at junior and under 23 world championships. Um, three of which were together. So we would, every year it was the opportunity, and so it felt like a big redemption on that front. And also it was both our first Henley wins as well that year in 2019.
Yeah.
So we had a great season.
Any surprise from you? You didn't make the Tokyo Olympics.
No, I mean not surprised. I wanted to, but it just I felt like with the COVID closures of Yale in 2020 that the IRAs and the chance to win a fourth had gone, but yet the games was delayed. So it seemed like the obvious thing to go, well, let's set my sights on that. But to be honest, there never really was a chance. And that wasn't, I mean, it was never communicated that there never really was going to be. Um, and I stand by the fact that I think people should always get the opportunity, even the last couple of years. And I mean, I would have said that last year.
Yeah,
The same, even when you're guarding your seat, I think the competitive environment, and it would have been nice to know if I was good enough or not. And then obviously there are grey areas with seat racing and selection and all of that, but I feel like there should be an attempt to put people into the mix, for the most part. So I wasn't necessarily surprised, but obviously it's still having no competition for the, well, 2.5 years really, essentially,
yeah,
um, was a challenge, and I'm a goal oriented individual, as we all are, as
yeah, yeah,
rowers. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was tough.
How surprised were you that they put you in the sixth seat when you were in the eight in 2022, the first year after the Tokyo Olympics?
I mean, part of me wanted to be there. I guess they're like, I don't know. We made sure to not play seat ego and all of that. I mean, the jokes are always made, but like we all crossed the line together.
Mm,
I know, to be honest, 2 weeks before the games, me and Morgan was in the sixth seat, and we couldn't figure out which way worked better. Um, like I was having a little trouble feeling my right leg and stuff, my hip, I think, was playing up a bit, so I wasn't necessarily at my best, and so we were playing around with it, and then we ended up literally a few days before the game sticking with what we knew. So, I mean, I think we could have put any of those guys in any seats, but in 2022, it was nice to be there, and that season felt like proving a point.
yeah,
Especially, I mean, the Brooks lot that I was with in 2021 all came in and had a point to prove, but then the guys I was living with, Freddie Davidson, Dave Ambler, Dave Copley, spent that year training, and then we all came in and became world champions in 2022. So like, I mean, there's the point to prove yourself, but to do it, I've had that like quite very bonding experience with those guys, and
Yeah,
then to all like me and Chopley, Dave, who copy that is, on the podium looking at Freddie and Dave after they'd raced the day before, like it was a pretty special moment.
yeah, yeah,
To have gone through all of that together and then done that. So
yeah. That's
um,
insane. Um, so Morgan, I mean, that would have been fascinating to have seen the reaction of your competitors, and if with Morgan in the sixth seat, and what you'd have been back in two, I suppose.
oh, three with the bucket with
Oh,
Jacob.
three
Sorry.
with the bucket.
Um,
Sorry. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah. Which we've undenied about the bucket as well, but I mean the long and the short of it was it doesn't matter. The previous year I didn't have a bucket. We did have a bucket. We swapped Morgan. It was the
Mm,
same for the most part. I don't like these things might have slight nuances, but I don't think they make. If you think they're making the difference, then you're probably not focusing on the
yeah,
stuff that
yeah.
is actually making the difference enough. Is my opinion.
So, how much quicker was your 24.8 for Paris than the 23.8 or the 22.8?
I guess we'll never really know. Um, I mean,
Speculate. Speculate.
speculate. Well, I think based off speed orders, we'll put it this way. This isn't the speed order we did in this year was 0.01 slower than the speed order we did in 2022, but the wind
Mm,
was about half. So I'd say we were quickest this year.
yeah,
Um, but it would have been close, and we in those speed orders we were putting out some pretty quick times every single one of those years. So would have loved some conditions to see how fast we actually could have gone, which it didn't really happen across this.
no, it didn't.
Apart from
So,
maybe once in Varese. Yeah,
yeah, that's interesting. So, what's the world's best time is like? Is it 5:18? Have I got that right from Germany?
18.7. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you reckon that could go to if an eight like yours came along in decent fast conditions?
On just trade secrets in some degree, but
No, no.
I think realistically, like you could get 5.16, and it can go 5.16 in the right conditions.
Wow, that's so cool.
Um, but then it's just saying that, isn't it? Until it's done, it's just talk. But
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think there are crews that have been capable of that. If you look at how many crews have gone sub 520, there are quite a few. Like in the pair and the four, like it's very different. There are a few standout crews at the world record time, and there's a big drop off. But there are quite a few in the eight that have gone sub 520. I think 12 or something like that. We had all the fastest times somewhere written down. So
Yeah, I
I think
gather.
I think
Yeah, go
there
on.
is a bit
Sorry.
more separation to be found there. No worries. And I
Yeah,
think there is a bit more separation in the right conditions.
yeah.
So
I gather the Netherlands eight on the Bosband did a 3:20, 3:55 for a 1500 just before the games. Admittedly,
all
that's
right.
the
Well, there you
Bosband.
go.
Yeah. So that sounds very
Was there any
quick.
flow? I haven't raced there. No, if there's no flow, I guess.
Yeah, on a good day, there's always flow. Lane one's great for it. Yeah. Uh, I think they're bidding for another Worlds actually.
Oh,
But
really?
I guess the thing is that probably in terms of courses in the Netherlands after the World Cup in Rotterdam in I can't remember what it was, like 2018 or something, or maybe it was
Sounds about
2019. It's
right.
2019. That was so unfair that it made the
But
Boss
just
Band
going
not fair.
basically across the lake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just horrendous crosswind. So, how was the whole thing of going into the Olympics as favourites in terms of unbeaten from 22, 23 to 24? Um, like what
It's a
did you?
challenge.
Yeah.
It really was a challenge. I mean, especially I think in the eight, the intensity with which you have to go out with. If there's like any complacency in your mind, that will tell. In a
Mm,
pair, if you kind of the other end of the spectrum with the sweet boats. If you have like a couple of, if you don't quite have the best start, you can sort of, put it in over the next 30 seconds, and it'll make up for it. But in the eight, if you get left behind, you get left behind. So we had to make sure that that didn't creep into the mentality at all. And I think we were very good at making ourselves feel like we weren't the favourites. I think it's the mind games that you play.
So how
Felt
did
like
you?
the US thought they were favourites at the games, so it's easy to just be like, whoever it was, it changed every time. It didn't really matter. It's not about the who. It's just about the way it plays on our own psychology. But like the Aussies, stacked their eight at one point, and so we were, the Aussies are going to be quick. The Aussies are going to be quick. It's just like the mental games that you play to just keep yourself motivated.
Mm,
And it changed. It changed like who was the crew that we thought were going to be the threat, and just making it like, having a point to prove every time you went out there was really important. We can't expect it to come to us because we did that, and that's exactly what happened in some of the race for lanes
yeah,
in Lucerne 10 weeks before the games.
yeah.
So
Well,
and so we had a wake up call then.
we can talk about that. I mean, there were two crews that beat you in this Olympiad. One was the Australians, when admittedly Charlie wasn't in the crew, but the other was the USA. Uh, in terms of the race for lanes. So were you just tired at Lucerne? What was the deal there?
Yeah, um, yeah. I don't think we didn't come into it on peak form. That's for sure. But also we didn't the emotional energy to required to deliver like two performances like that. Maybe we had, but we didn't do. We sort of expected the US to sort of trail off as we went around the course. So it was a well rode piece, but it wasn't. They didn't have the fire. It didn't have the kick. Um, and then the final sort of flipped that completely, where we had so much fire and kick. I was expecting to be in a dogfight at the K, and then we were a length up, and then almost that led us to believe like we had a slight sigh of relief. Um, and I remember watching it back, and I remember having this as actually a thought in my pocket coming into the games. But it was such a close result in the end at Lucerne. But I listened to Harry's Cox recording, and about 4 strokes to go, he yells like they're not coming through. And it's not on him. I'm not saying that, but that we take that far too literally, and you can see the boat just dropped in the water. And I was like, so we had like a few things coming into the games, but one of them was like, do not give us any like we're too lazy. We're too lazy. You can't say me saying that coming into the last 4 strokes because like any inkling of that sort of allowed it to. So we weren't expecting to be that far up, and that sort of allowed us to sort of maybe just 0.5% come off in the second half in the final.
Mm,
So the psychology plays around in different ways, and I think we got all of it right come the games, which is exactly what I mean. The World Cups are for at the end of the day. I don't like we always use them as learning experiences more than like events to win. That was our mentality.
yeah,
The world's obviously being a big one, but like um, just trying to go unbeaten and not learn anything doesn't necessarily teach you that much. So we reflect on both of those losses very positively, to be honest.
yeah. Which is a great sign. Like you, I've watched that race back and listened to Harry's coxing, and very calm in the first 1,000 meters. And then, boy, does he kick off in the second 1,000 meters. And there's a few expletives. I think some of them were aimed at you. I think it's Charlie and Diggers. I think the
Yeah,
basically it
yeah,
seems
it
when he
was.
wants something, it's Charlie and Diggers, and there's expletive. I can't remember if there was a c word
Yeah,
there, but there might have been.
there was a
Um,
c word. Yeah, it's a running joke, and so it wasn't me. It was a couple of guys at Brooks in 2021. But I remember we were doing some pieces, and I think we were having a bad day in the eight, going around one of the bends, and obviously Harry had the telemetry at that point, and I was not pulling my weight, that's for sure. So I think he called me it then, and we all had a laugh about it. Well, I wasn't the first, and I wasn't the last of that year at Brooks because it kind of became a little bit of a joke. But so then whenever we're doing pieces, someone like Freddie would yell, "Harry, call me a c word," and it just stuck. So I was one of the guy, only the guy from that sort of era in the boat. It just like it's a double whammy because it's like it's it's funny, and it kind of reminds me of the time, the bond we have, even though it's like, quite very crude and very rude, but also then like I've had experience every time that has come up over the last 4 years. The knee jerk is to go, so it worked, and it kind of
Yeah,
also put a bit of a smile, like, it made you relax a little bit as you start to go for it, rather than just being like
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
tense and overwhelmed. So, yeah.
Um, so one of the things which is really interesting, which I guess is a Brooks thing, I don't know what you can say about it, is the
Mhm.
various tiers that Harry calls towards the end of a
Mhm.
race. Can you say something about that?
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, I don't think it's rocket science. So I think I can share it as well. What I mean by that, but it just you can. I think different crews assign different meanings to the tiers anyway, but it just sort of comes 750, 500, 250, and they can float a little bit as and when that's needed. And so just a half pip, I think a little bit of power at 750. Um, and there might be a new technical focus there, and then sort of the rate jumps come from 500 to go. Two pips there, and then 2 pips in the last 250. So
yeah.
um, it's just, yeah, you just got to practice the exact sort of slide length changes, or like there isn't much of a length change, but exactly how you move and increase the speed of movement. Because the time under the water, Trap always said, never really changes. It's just the speed of the way you move on the recovery. So
So would you look to go longer or shorter, slightly shorter on a call? What would your response usually be?
make sure I keep it direct, slightly shorter in terms of the shin angle.
Yeah.
So maybe just a little bit less um, on the legs. That's a bit of a Gladstoneism, but then finishing the strokes out the same way. And then probably after a couple of strokes, you might get a bit more length, is
Mm,
what I always find. So you have two to just kind of get them speed of movement, and then
yeah.
once that boat's moving at a higher speed, it might come under you just that fraction more. You might end up rowing back at the same length you were before.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
actively try and do that, but that kind of probably is actually what's happening.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the pressure in terms of the start. I mean, in terms of great eights, I think I was talking to George Nash, who you'll probably know as gold medalist from Rio in the four,
Yeah.
and I was asking him about what he'd seen in the Olympics, and he essentially described you guys as phenomenal. Probably the best day ever. Um, in terms of the way
What a
you
compliment.
rode, yeah, which is pretty cool coming from George. And I just wonder, how do you get off the start? Because you went off the start quickly. I know the Dutch led you a little bit, but how do you get in an eight without trying too hard to get that pace, the first 250, moving through again to 500, with the sort of smoothness and flow? How does that come?
So I don't think we necessarily. I mean, my input was to bring some of the stuff from Yale and Gladstone, and Brooks was very similar. I saw a couple of. I was quite lucky, really, to have gone through both those programs. I think at the time, best in the US and best in the UK, and neither of
Mm,
those programs had took loads of strokes. You'd sort of set the pattern up in the right way over the first few strokes, and you might lose a canvas come 10 strokes in, but then come 20 strokes in, you're level again, and come 30 strokes, you're a seat up, which isn't necessarily the case in the Olympic final, but the, the mentality is that you're just taking good long strong strokes. I saw a video lately, and I was joking with Freddie about it, and it's quite a good analogy. There was this, I think he's Australian, but he's a 16, 17-year-old 100-meter sprinter, and he's got 10 seconds. He went 10.02 or zero 0.4 as a 17-year-old. So it might be South African. I have to check.
yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway, the
yeah.
point the point of it was he's lagging behind that first 40 meters, same as Usain Bolt. So even in a race like that short, that long stride length, and then just like kicking it, and just like the relentlessness of that is what won us the race down the track, rather than trying to do something like excessively quickly in the first little bit. So we're taking strong, hard, like long strokes, and that gets us out most of the time level. When crews weren't, in the earlier side of the Olympiad, we had quite a big margin, but we always knew that the standard was going to rise, and and it did, and but we didn't really let that fluster our approach to things. And
Mm,
it's that, keep doing what we're doing and it will show. Keep doing what we're doing and it will show. So we didn't necessarily over egg first D50. We did it a few times in training for fun, but we decided the approach was best as the way it was.
yeah. How strong was your belief that you were going to win that Olympic final?
It was really strong, but at the same time, it wasn't result dependent. Um, we all came from different perspectives with that. Rory Gibbs was one who talked about it a lot. He kind of it was gold or nothing for him in Tokyo. And for me as well, it was very similar. I don't know, just to have the personal battles I've had over the last couple of years. I didn't feel in my best place, and so it was just about delivering what I was capable of. Because for me, that meant taking a sort of like a percent off, just doing what I was capable of, believing that was enough. And luckily, we had sort of a backlog of evidence to say that when we were on our best day, it'll be enough. So I could easily sit with myself and go, right, I know what I'm going to do. I've done it before. There's a few things that I'm better at than I was last year or whatever it was. And so I was really calm. I was really nervous for the heat, but for the final, really calm and just sort of
Mm.
stuck to your processes. And yeah, I got more excitement watching it back than I did being in the race, because just trying not to overwhelm myself in the moment.
Because you were slower than
Um,
the States in your heat, weren't you?
yeah, yeah, which could have been a million things. It could have been conditions. They could have been
Yeah,
quicker. But again, it's like one of those things where it's like, good. Like they've got the confidence. We've got a bit of a kick up the arse. Whether it's true or not, it didn't really matter. It just, can you handle the mind games in the six,
yeah.
7 days there was between the heat and the final? As long as you could sort of not let those kind of things eat away at you, I think it was a good thing, because you're not expecting anything, but it's a fine line. It's a balance between the confidence of trusting your process and therefore not trying to go beyond that, but also not trusting it to the extent you're like, well, if I, the complacency element. So it's a line to tread, and I think we treaded
Mm.
it quite well. And at points we didn't, so we had the experience to know where that was.
During the race, was there a time in the race, I'm thinking possibly in the third quarter, but maybe it was somewhere else, where you thought, are we going to win this?
Maybe at 900, but like I didn't really let it cross my mind. I kind of maybe like, oh yeah, we're in a good place, we're going to win. I like maybe that crossed my mind. I was like, no, put it aside.
Mm.
And then I just was focusing on the calls, especially because I mean I was really really adamant about this, and I think it worked quite well. Was the States obviously came back in the race in Lucerne, the last race
Yeah,
we'd had, 500 meters to go, and so I didn't know where we were going to be, and it could all pan out very differently. But in my head, it was like that was a point to win the race. And then it kind of like if they get any momentum, then they're gonna feed off that. So as soon as we Harry hears them make that move, because we were expecting to go out hard and we thought we might
yeah,
be up, and as soon as Harry hears that, that is the moment to just be like, shut the door. Like, no, you're not even getting a seat this time. And I think that worked. Though watching the race back, you can see actually it almost seems like a bit of a non-event, which means it's a job well done for us.
yeah, yeah,
Because the moment they started to move back last time, it looked like they're going to do it for a second, and then you can see us just respond. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, there were little things in my head from many years, and then last year was the Dutch. I remember Harry screaming like, "The Dutch are coming!" And one of the things I only remember a few things that I just like, no, they're effing not, in my head. 200 meters to go, and so it was just like 20 strokes to make sure the Dutch don't do the thing they've done every year and just you know get closer and closer and closer. I was like,
yeah.
so just you had to focus at every point, and it was technical, but also led by like the emotion of previous times. So
Mm.
it was all fed into a very very well delivered race plan.
Yeah, I think the Dutch thought they could beat you in terms of a race. They knew you were a better, stronger eight, but I think they kind of had this thing of we're better racers, but they never really got in a position where they could deliver.
Mm. I can't speak to that. And I've chatted to a couple of them, and they were always like, they're like, the eight's easier to beat. We all want to be in the eight because we think like you're the weak GB boat to beat. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's all of these things. like yeah, saying that only fuels the fire, doesn't it? So I don't know what they're
Mm.
doing there. But anyway, yeah, like a
Did
big,
you
but like I think we fed off the confidence of other crews, so it was only a benefit to us when people said they felt they were going to beat us. Because and you're like, okay, cool, they think they're going to do it. Let's prove them wrong. You get another point to prove. So
did you
it's a
talk to
benefit.
anyone in the Australian eight at all about what happened to them?
Not explicitly. No, my brother is really good mates with Angus Dawson.
Mm.
But I don't know. I mean, I like you can have your viewpoint from the outside, but it's really hard to know. I think they were going quite quickly over 1500, and it seemed to me that they had some good shorter end speed from the races we've had. You know, they were level with us in the US in the heat in Lucerne. They had their moments of showing some flying speed, and they never really stuck over the whole course for them, with the exception of the Lucerne
Yeah,
they beat us. But that was a different crew to the one that raced the Olympics as well. So
yeah. Um,
um,
During this Olympiad, you've obviously had to deal with your mum Julie getting ill and
mhm,
and then sadly passing away. And
mhm.
I find I'm sure other people will find it difficult to sort of try and understand how you can deal with that in terms of keeping going what you're doing in terms of training. What can you say about that?
It was it was damn difficult. I mean, Lucerne, I mean, was a very poignant moment of that. I mean, and talk about the cruise journeys in the way I just have, and that's all true. But on an individual level, um, I found Lucerne incredibly difficult. I had no emotional energy left. She passed away in December 4th, so just over a year ago now. Still feels quite recent. But back then, the last race she came to was Lucerne, which is actually the one we lost. And I thought I had a dramatic moment after I crossed the finish line that because I wasn't in the boat when it rode back, but that's because I knew that was going to be the last race Mum came to,
Yeah,
and it was. And so I got out of the boat and I chased after her and I said, guys, like they knew about all of this, and so I just I chased after her and gave her a hug. And she loved it's one of the races she loved coming to. So I just I felt her presence there.
yeah,
I guess you go through waves of it. It's a beautiful place. It feels quite spiritual. And I
yeah,
just sort of I had a really big wave of grief, if I'm honest, in that time for that racing Lucerne, and we lost. And I was like I was okay going through the status quo, but we had there were many moments. But double Sierra Nevada, had to go back to Sierra Nevada after I'd already come home, to go to her to pass. Basically, I got the call while I was up in Sierra Nevada, and all the GB rowers know that's a horrible place, and then it's got some pretty dire associations to me. And then I had to go back there and do it all over again. So just I ran my battery dry in terms of emotional energy, and then Lucerne was a real question point for me. I was like,
yeah,
am I actually good enough? Not good enough, I guess is the wrong word, but good enough on the day. That Robson, Sam Nunn, those are very good guys, and we're all egotistical and think we could beat each other. But I had I had some serious questions to ask myself, because I most of all didn't want to let the guys in the eight down. And if I was going to do a worse job than those guys, then I was seriously questioning for a while, like whether I could do it. And it was kind of I had the Saturday between the heat and the final of Lucerne was a massive, um, full of energy. I sat down and contemplated a lot, and sort of just had to find a bit of a why. And I had that, and I won't name the name, but I had three tiers in sort of my head that I could draw upon, and it was for one of the guys in the boat. Not that I have any more love for one in the boat than anyone else. You just can't think of them all at the same time. And then that's my partner, and then for Mum. And I was like, it's so harder to disappoint other people than it is yourself. Like I didn't really at that point want it enough, if I'm honest. For me, I didn't, but
mm,
I'd seen Mum struggle in a major way, and my dad had invested so much in me and supporting Mum. So I was like, I, and I can't let these guys down. So I kind of used that as a bit of a test. I was like,
mm,
this is the lowest I've ever felt, and if the race in Lucerne goes okay in the final, then I think probably from a personal perspective, then I probably can deal with the pressure of the Olympics because I don't think it's going to feel like this. And honestly, it didn't. That certain race to me was so difficult. I had to draw on everything, and it worked. And I found something out of nowhere, and it's taken a while to sort of to come back down to earth after the games because of how much I had to really drain my emotions and put a lot of things aside. Yeah, dealing with my grief, supporting family in a way, and so many other things. And my partner lost her dad just months before as well, so
Oh no.
there was no escaping the terminal illness, and so we spent 8 Christmases together, and now I'm here with my dad, and she's with her mum because the parents sort of both need that. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that change, and I had to put all of that aside. So all that to say, basically that like my why became for other people,
Mm.
purely for other people, because I just had nothing left to give, and that was enough to sort of get me through the final 10 weeks. So it really was counting down the days. Yeah, and another reason I kind of want to go back to the sport, having a bit of a break. The reason I needed a break, but also one of the reasons I want to go back is I want to do it without the weight of all of the stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which would be, I kind of lost my love of the sport because of everything going on, and I do love it. But the games is when it is, and I had choices to make, and it all turned out okay. And I actually found a photo yesterday of all the celebrations for Harry standing up, but there's one photo of me just going like that, and I didn't realize it
Uh,
existed until yesterday. Someone Rugin sent it to me on a drive, so I've got that framed, and that's what all that was about to me, seeing it through for everyone,
uh,
but seeing it through for her.
yeah.
So yeah, I
I
love
have
her.
I have to say you've expressed that so beautifully and
Thanks, Martin.
powerfully. It was a privilege to listen to that. In terms of it's a while since I've had to experience grief. My dad passed away 20 odd years ago,
I'm sorry.
but yeah, which is a long time now. And when we go down to Molesey, the boat is there called Pat Cross because they asked, what name did I want to call the boat. So I thought I'd name it after Dad. Um, it did strike me
But
as you were talking. Sorry,
no, no, go on. No,
it did strike me
it's
as
fine.
you were talking because I know your dad Nick, and he did that for Dad's row down the Thames. But obviously, as the parent left, and you talked about your brother as well. You're obviously grieving as a family, and your dad is. I guess he was wondering, because he's grieving himself. How he could support, and there's so much stuff that goes into that experience.
There, there is, and I think until you experience it, which everyone will, I think. So,
Yeah,
there's so many things that you don't quite think of, and I could say them now to someone who's listening and hasn't lost someone close to them, and don't think it would quite sink in. But
mm,
I do think there should, we should be more open about the conversations around it. I found it quite difficult.
mm,
I mean, it is an environment that's like highly pressurized, but people are afraid to say the word, it's passed away. People really avoid the subject a
yeah,
lot, and sometimes that can feel quite isolating. Like you're really not talking about it is the way it is. It's brutal and it's
mm,
savage. And there was, I don't want to. I kind of, it's more out of a disservice to mum. I don't want to go into the details. Rather than for me personally, I think people should be aware that these things can happen because
yeah,
otherwise, suddenly, you've only find out in a very dramatic turn of events.
yeah.
But I guess it's a rowing podcast. This isn't the place for it, but there's plenty of
No,
places out there that are having these conversations, and
mm,
I certainly am when I get the chance to talk as well.
yeah. Um, let's move on to your time at Yale. How big a deal was it to win three IRA titles on the bounce?
Massive deal, massive deal. Um, I still call Steve very regularly.
Really?
I am so fortunate. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I say once a month. It slipped a little bit, but it is what it is. I call him when, and he's always happy to chat. That's yeah. He's full of mantras, and one of his mantras that sums him up as well is like, to coach the oarsman, you must coach the man. Gendered quote from Steve Fairbairn, but applies both ways. But he is a true mentor, a father figure, and he's always happy to counsel me on anything. I've had some personal things happen in the last few years with mum and other stuff, and I can pick up the phone to him, and he can go and he can advise and be present and hold space for me, which is phenomenal. I feel like there are very few. I thought it was everywhere when I was young. I got lucky in the Steve, and I thought that's kind of what being a leader and a good coach was like. But I think actually I've heard people, young guys who've gone on to corporations in the States and
Mm.
said, he's top 10 CEO in the US. Like he's not obviously not running a big company, but like in terms of his people management and his respect and so many things it's hard to put into words. He's one of the guys. So I'm um, so lucky to have had him and still have him as a mentor in my life.
Mm. Um,
But yeah, to answer your initial question, sorry, I go off on a tangent. But the
that's okay.
IRAs I think was it was unexpected for me the first year, but then I think he always reflects on it as, how many crews from that aren't Cal or Washington have won it over the last 20 years. There aren't that many, and the demands on and the restrictions as well with the training are more of a challenge at um, some of those universities. So I think it kind of he always says that actually like he's won many with Cal and Brown and all over the shop. So he always speaks to it as a real achievement that we managed to do that in those years, and it was a really special time.
Yeah. Um, you were with Charlie Elwes as, a fellow Yale student.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about your relationship a bit? Because he was at Radley,
Sure.
you were at Abingdon, but you came together. Were you like a J16 there in a Cox 4 or something?
I was, yeah. We did. So he did J16 Worlds as well the year before in the Cox Four. So we had we all were always tied at the hip. It seemed like, and he was a factor as to going to Yale as well. I looked at a lot of the East Coast unis and
Mm.
decided to go there. And it just our relationship is a funny one. Everyone takes the piss out of it. It became one of the running jokes of the boat because we're so polar opposite. Like he'll rock up on the day and be phenomenal and be like, "Diggers, mate, do you have my caffeine?" Was one of the running jokes, or like, "Do you have a gel?" Or like, he's just like, it wasn't him saying it. Well, it was him sometimes, but everyone else latched onto the fact that especially when we were younger, it was like I made sure I had two of everything that I needed, and Charlie would end up probably having it every single time.
Yeah.
um, making and we always shared a room together as well back in 2014 and then 2024. So it was I realised at the games I'd spent more time in a room with Charlie than I had my partner of 8 years, as in like sleeping in the same room as. So I was like, that was my response coming out of Paris. They were like, "Are you coming back?" I was like, "I need a bit of a break from Charlie at least. Once I've been in the bed with Kessel and I have Charlie, I know the room. You know what I mean? It's yeah. Then maybe I'll think about it, but so it was, I'd say, almost very brotherly. Like we wound each other up in many ways. We're so polar opposite. Like I'm very like meticulous and like take care of the details, and Charlie's like he is very stressed and very passionate, but it doesn't manifest in the same way.
Mm.
He kind of oh, it'll be fine, like laissez-faire type thing, and then and so we could frustrate each other, and so yeah, it became one of the running jokes, and I have a lot of love for Charlie because we spent so much time together. And so yeah, so many stories, but for
Yeah.
another time.
That's beautiful. So there are a few things I don't under, or one thing I didn't. I tried to understand it, but I didn't. So talk to me about quad sculling and being somewhere down in the B final and what on earth was going on there.
What are my reflections on that? Um, well, I think basically, I had two silvers at that point, and the quad won gold in Rio with Robin and Josh Armstrong at that time. So he was obviously coaching and he was back, and Robin was the head coach. So as head coaches do, they steer athletes towards their sculling or sweep, whichever they're respectively responsible for. So what happened was early IDs in the single, Josh and I had a bit of a battle. I came second to him by a couple of seconds, and then I can't remember like margins or whatever, but anyway, the top four from that trial ended up being the quad. And so, yeah, no, I think at points we were really good in that quad. We kind of went like well best time at Caversham, but then we changed the lineup round. It was one of those
Oh,
long summers. Um, so it was one of those long summers, and we just like couldn't quite consistently get it right. We really couldn't. And I think for me, um, maybe Robin didn't know it at the time, but like I always needed to take kind of a couple of percent off, and his mentality was sort of add a couple of percent on. So I
yeah,
vividly remember, and Steve was very good at getting this sort of side out of me. It's like Steve always used to say, "Beware the oarsman that looks for work, for he shall find it." There's another Steve Fairbairn quote, I think. He'd say the opposite thing to someone else, but he knew I needed that.
yeah,
So Robin was like, we raced the German double that ended up getting silver or whatever that year, in Munich, me and Josh. We were going quite well. We were leading them at the K, and then he's like, after one of the heats, he was like, well, you need to commit to like hospitalizing yourself at the 1,000 meter mark, which I did, and I found lots of work and I could pat myself on the back about it, but we didn't find much more speed. So I think my lesson from that is um, another quote from Steve. I've got so many of them. Work the oar to move the boat. It's not about necessarily finding work. It's just about what moves the boat forward. And for me, that doesn't necessarily mean everything. Like it actually means I need to hold myself back a fraction for that to happen. And then also that I think that crew didn't get on perfectly. We all get on and we would all chat now, but there wasn't the same bond as crews I've experienced in the past, and I think that's absolutely essential.
yeah,
Absolutely essential.
yeah,
If you have, like I was saying before about the reasons for my motivation, if you have that attached motivation to someone else, that's more powerful than having the stronger guy in the crew who even on
mm,
paper makes the boat better. I think
mm,
that's so yeah. And the only other thing is I say I probably wasn't technically skillful enough at sculling. The early ideas was 5K at 28 or something, and I could barely even rate 28. I could just lump that thing along because I was so strong. But when it gets to racing 40 in a quad, I didn't quite have it nailed down. Maybe with a bit more time, I could have figured it out, but I decided going to Yale and all of that. That was that. Uh, yeah, just need to rate cap any sculling I do, and I'll be fine.
oh, that's pretty cool. Can we talk a bit about Caversham because it's
Mm-hmm.
obviously mostly been an incredible system that GB
Mm-hmm.
rowing has had through Caversham. Um, and there's also elements of it where people have decided, I think a lot of the eight from Rio, or the guys from the Rio team, people like Paul Bennett or Stan Ludis, like
Mm-hmm.
just had enough of it, and there wasn't much love for the Caversham system. How's it for you? How have you experienced it?
um, I have struggled at points with the way that it's managed, but it's obviously done me phenomenally. And like I say, I didn't necessarily feel at points that it was delivering for me physiologically, or that it was crafted in a way that my experience at Yale sort of maybe was so good that I don't think really many places would compare. I initially thought that everywhere would be like that, but that's not necessarily the case. And having a leader like Steve, and there are a lot of phenomenal people within the building. I never want the negative reflections that people have, and I don't think they ever do really
Mm,
to be attributed to individuals, especially like Steve Trapmore, our coach. Like um, any of the stuff that was going on in the wider building, I and the crew put aside, and we had the nine of us. We had Steve. We had for me Sam, the weights coach, and Emma, the physio. And it's like that's our 12-man unit, and that's all I
mm,
need to focus on. But I don't know. There are a few things around the physiology side of things. I feel like in general it's crafted to be very tough, and things like on training camps,
mm,
sessions will be put in not for necessarily a particular purpose, but because we want sessions throughout the day and it's tougher. And I don't necessarily feel like that is the limiting factor. I feel
mm-hmm,
like it should all be geared towards the science a little more. I mean, if I'm, I guess I'm at liberty to say this, but I think Jurgen's program was phenomenal and was years and years ahead of its time, and its legacy through GB rowing as speaks, through the results.
mm,
But other programs are catching up, if not going past it, because the science is moving on.
mm,
I mean, look at the Dutch; they all have individualized sessions and are all getting physiological PBs, and also a lot of them are returning because the agency that they feel over their training, which was a massive part for me of why I found it really difficult to see my scores not improving,
mm,
having been on a program that I wrote myself that was improving them. And I understand the difficulties to manage it, but then when you see the Dutch who are doing something like that, especially at times of stress, if you lose a race and you're like, well, if I just did this,
mm,
it's a very tricky balance to find. And then also there were added elements of frustration, feeling quite isolated in the environment because of the stuff I said about
mm,
mum. In many
mm,
ways, they're very supportive, but I don't think that's necessarily a GB rowing thing as well. There's a quite a it's one of those things you tend to have to deal with on your own, and not and no one was really going to create space for that. But I was kind of looking for it because it's not a normal job on
mm,
training camps. You don't really have you're not going home to your family to have those conversations. You're on the
yeah,
phone. So I kind of the lack of ability for people to have those conversations some of the time, but I've also found quite challenging. So yeah, a few things there without saying too much. I'm not at liberty to say, but
yeah,
I think as well they might have changed a lot since 2016. I can't speak to it massively, but the guys who were around in the Tokyo cycle and the Paris cycle definitely say we changed the vibe. And the funny thing is actually, again, Freddie and Dave, for example, the bunch of jokers and the pair of them like ending up in boats together, sort of continued their wave of schoolboyishness. And for a while, it took. I'll say the coaches without naming any names. They kind of looked on it, like it was a problem for the first 6 months. Eventually, they gave up and just rolled with it. And I mean, that wasn't just true of Freddie and Dave, but they were the most, out there with all of their
yeah,
stupid humor. So we all were making cracking silly jokes and doing that before races and pieces and all of it. And so the atmosphere changed on that front. And I kind of think there was a massive us from Brooks, but also I knew like the guys like Shelton and Charlie, but enough of a body to be like, this is how we are going to act. Like this is all of us, and
mm,
like we're also as a collective very good. So like we had the confidence and the prowess to be like, this is how we're doing it. Coaches get involved in the mentality side of things,
yeah,
and like having fun with it. And so that I think changed quite a lot. Um, and maybe like I don't know whether we would have had the confidence to do that under someone with the demeanor of Jurgen. I don't know,
yeah,
but I can't really say to that if that was an impact. Just in terms of, I'm not talking about anything else. Just in terms of like let's have fun with it element of our days. So
yeah,
um, we had fun and we just like this is what we're doing. So it
yeah.
was slightly shifted from that perception that maybe guys from the past had.
Uh, Tom, please back this question away, which might deserve to be batted away, actually. What, if anything, do you want to say about Oxford Brookes?
I haven't really been involved in the recent. Um, yeah, it's hard to know what to say publicly.
I'd
They're a
bat it
very successful
away.
club, and
I'd bat it away
yeah,
then. I'd bat it away. One of the things
I've,
that
I know very mixed experiences. I will say that I was only party to it for a year, and the guys I was with in the boat speak about their experience phenomenally. But I know a few as well who've had horrible experiences that I think are horribly and unwarranted. So
mm,
I think there is stuff that exists on either end of the spectrum, and I hope the investigation gets to the
mm,
bottom of it. But it's hard to part what the things that make the club successful. Sometimes some of the
yeah,
things that are really not permissible. So
I I was talking. Thank you. I was talking to Jan van der Baaij, who was well, he was at seven in the Dutch eight, in the Olympics. And I said, "What was your favourite training session?" And he said, "2 hours in bed." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Oh no, the guys they had to do 2 hours on the bike, but the physiologist said no, you're not right. You need to go and lie down and sleep." And that's what came to head in that individuation that you were talking about.
Well, someone like Morgan, for example, would definitely be one of those guys. He could do in terms of volume a very minimal amount of volume, and he did going into 2021, and he smashed his scores in 2021. Like he went up 4 seconds quicker than he ever did on the 2K again, with that low volume, high intensity, like
Mm,
German volume training weights approach as well. And he just yeah. So he would be one of those guys, and I would be probably the guy going out on a bike for 4 hours because that's how I find like the low intensity, like the
mm,
Sean Bowden Oxford type training, the UT 2.5 sort of thing, and then polarizing it. So
mm.
I don't necessarily know how the science figures it out to know exactly what works for you, but I feel like as you've been in the sport for long enough, you know what works for you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
but the element of agency I'm enjoying in my training at the moment. So
So we're coming to the end of our chat now, Tom. It's been such a treat. You're doing lots of different things, I think, coming up by the sounds of things that you've got to look forward to.
yeah,
And
I've been bouncing around. I tried a high rocks and did another one, which I did terribly at, which has got a bit of rowing in it, but trying to get good at running. But I'm co-founding a company with two French entrepreneurs, committed for
wow,
at least till November 26th. So that's my number one priority. And then the going to be training as well for a few different things, with eyes to maybe return. We'll see how the next year sort of was fully invested in that company Kaiju, and then training around that for a few different challenges, and then we'll see where we go from there. But I needed the space from it all and to have some new perspective,
mm,
given how drained I was. So um,
yeah,
I am excited about the year coming up.
wow. So Tom, I'm just going to say thank you. It was wonderful to talk with you. That there was,
And you,
such a
Martin, it was a pleasure.
thank you. Such a richness in that chat that will linger long in the memory. So I'll end the live part of this interview now, but just to say thanks so much, Tom Digby.
Thanks, Martin. Awesome.